I currently work on the book with two fantastic co-authors, Professor Gareth Davies, who's at the Free University in Amsterdam, and Professor Giorgio Monti, who was head of the law department at the European University Institute and is now at Tilburg. I was at London School of Economics for 25 years. I was in the law department all that time, but I was also head of the European Institute for 4 years. And more recently I've gone off to somewhere outside Europe, to the National University of Singapore, largely so I can see Europe from a sort of a fresh perspective. What I've really enjoyed about writing about European Union law is, I think, three things. First, if you look at the issues that continually come up within Europe, they're so topical, and they raise such a wide array of issues, be it what's taking place in the Eurozone, the migration refugee crisis, debates about political and liberal values across the EU and whether the EU should do anything about them, and finally, and perhaps most topically at the moment, Brexit. The second thing that I find most interesting about EU law, perhaps more than any other area of law, is that it's always politically contested. It's not simply that people might take a different view on what the law should be, but even if they agree on the content, there's always arguments about who should be adopting that law and perhaps how it should be implemented. And the third thing and this is the thing that I think always gets EU lawyers a little bit curious, that is interesting about the EU, it invites us to think about doing things in new ways. It's not just being done at a national level or international level, but there's this curious regional organisation with a equally curious institutional settlement, which may or may not get it right, but it does it differently, and is that a good thing or not? One of the things we find very interesting about the EU is you can find a wide array of materials about it, not just legal and non-legal materials, political science, sociology, economics, but also there are interesting blogs, policy pieces, and trying to bring those together to give a flavour of the debate so that one can see the law in its surrounding context but still be aware of the law was important to us. So we hope we find some sort of blend in the book between giving readers a good account of the law, giving an account of the context that both informs them but hopefully makes the law a little bit more stimulating. Well, this book, the last book we wrote we wrote it in 2013, 2014, and at that time everyone was talking about the sovereign debt crisis. Would the euro area survive? But that was the only thing people were really worrying about. And I thought, once you get over that, which it looked like the EU had in 2013, and go back to being how it was. But that wasn't true. Since then, we've had the issues surrounding the migration crisis in the Mediterranean, which generated huge pressures on European integration, European cooperation, as well as huge debates about the humanitarian values that Europe's meant to represent. We've had the emergence of populism, and these have challenged some of the assumptions about the EU. And finally, we've had Brexit. It's the first time any state, but in this case a large member state, my member state, I'm a UK citizen, has decided to leave the EU, and this has raised a lot of questions for that state. It has changed the nature of politics, in my view, at least for the short to medium term here in the UK. But it's also raised some broader questions beyond the UK for what the EU stands for. Does it matter if a state leaves? How should it deal with it? How should it move forward and perhaps rethink its identity in the light of this contestation and challenges to perhaps some traditional assumptions? So dealing with Brexit in the fourth edition was interesting and challenging. So the way we tried to do it was, we thought it was important to incorporate the different dimensions, the different legal dimensions of Brexit into each chapter. And that means situating them against the existing or pre-existing situation. And we hope we've managed to contrast, if you like, the existing law with the UK as a member of the EU with what will happen when the UK leaves the EU. For those separate questions, this was the withdrawal agreement and future arrangements, we have a particular chapter But we did it on the basis at that time of Theresa May's agreement, which set out a particular view, particularly for in the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, which was subsequently not accepted by the UK Parliament and was renegotiated by the United Kingdom and the EU. What we will be doing is to make sure that it is up to date. We'll be putting an online chapter that amends that. Well, I will be doing that in January 2020, which will put online